in the Arab region, particularly the countries that are bordering the European countries. We see more people sinking at sea, and we see an increase in these accidents. And this requires adopting security measures. Many countries are focusing on the security approach and are not adopting human rights-based approaches or migrant labor considerations. It seems as if the target now is to criminalize irregular migration and not to go back to the spirit of the GCM and to see how we can help the irregular migrants to actually regularize their status and thus benefit from all the rights and benefits without any discrimination. So the security approaches that are in place are increasing, whether in the border protection strategies or country sovereignty measures, or even in data collection processes. We see that the data collected is not for the objective of improving services or access to services by irregular migrants or regularizing procedures or equitable procedures put in place. We see that the data collection aims at strengthening repatriation and putting in place more stringent measures. So the indicators need to be more related to the human right aspect and decent work. When it comes to labor migration, the indicators should rely significantly on labor, on the standards of ILO and human rights standards as well, particularly when it comes to decent labor. And we need to see also to what extent countries are really endeavoring to improving irregular migration through human rights-based approaches and regularization programs that are facilitating access to services and that would allow migrants to enjoy all their rights regardless of their status or migration status. Migrants need to feel safe that they are able to reach these services and justice, which means that regularizing their situation and ensuring that all migrants can regularize their situation is accessible. However, the security measures in place are terrifying migrants and prohibiting those from getting in contact with the state organizations and institutions to make sure that all stakeholders can benefit and can ensure regular migration to all. So this is in brief what I wanted to say, and I join my voice to what my colleague Mohammed have said about about the right to association, labor unions, etc. All of these are a priority. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these important points also. We have some of the comments that are being made, rightly reflecting on the complexity of labor migration issues. And for this, as a workstream, we were lucky to also have workstream members representing ILO and ETUC, and therefore also bringing in their expertise with regard to labor migration and the different thematics that are related to that. And we may hear from them going forward. But before continuing with the giving the floor to the chair, so to answer the questions, I would like to ask Basem to intervene, and perhaps if you could introduce yourself before making your comment, that would be great. Thank you.
تحية طيبة للجميع. أنا باسم مزام من النقابة المستقلة للعاملين في بلديات شمال الأردن.
Apologies, we cannot hear Mr. Bassam clearly. I will try as much as possible to interpret what he's saying. I would like to say how important it is to implement the different items and indicators Unfortunately, I would like to make a small comment and raise a question. I think we need a better
جميع الجهات العاملة
platform that will allow all stakeholders to assist or to focus and provide services to migrant laborers. You know that Jordan has a considerable diaspora of migrants. I personally, I'm still an irregular migrant. I cannot participate in negotiations related to trade unions, etc. When it comes to the GCM, I think there's a lot of difficulty in implementing it or having in place independent decision making. For example, in the northern part of Jordan, there are many migrants, let's say from Bangladesh and other countries. They were in really, really bad conditions on all aspects. And there were some services that were provided to assist those migrants who were in really a dire situation. The question is for irregular migrants or for migrants that cannot be registered in a country, how can we ensure the right of their migrants or to hear their voice so that their rights are respected and also to improve their situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these points also to Basem. Claire, would you like to take the floor and answer to some of these questions?
Yes, thank you so much, Irene, and thank you, colleagues and representatives of governments and civil society stakeholders for your voice and for sharing with us your thoughts on this process and also on this specific set of indicators. You've raised a number of very critical issues, which we'll definitely try to reflect. I want to underscore again that this is an opportunity really for you to tell us what works about the proposal and what we need to do better. So please don't feel shy. Please engage and share with us your perspectives. That's what we're here for. So I think I'm going to cluster some of the responses because I think the breadth of what you've spoken to can be summarized perhaps in 3 or 4 broad thematic areas. I think one is about SDG 1071. We have colleagues who are participating in this meeting who are experts on this particular indicator, and I might ask them later to take the floor and also respond to you more directly. But I had a broader comment, which is, as you can see from the way we've developed the proposal, one of the key aspects of Para 70 is to build on existing frameworks, and in particular the SDGs. And why is that? It's because we want to make sure that the indicators that are proposed have support from the governments. As you know, the SDG indicators go through the IAG SDG process, where the governments that are members of that expert group, an interagency group, review the indicators in terms of their relevance, their scope, but also that they have data, and that data has often quite an extensive time series. Now, in building on these existing indicators, such as 1072, we recognize that many of them are very complex and difficult to collect and compile. And so perhaps seeing the complementarity of the processes could be a way to actually strengthen the capacity in the collection of the information and make it easier for member states to provide information both for monitoring the SDGs and other processes such as the Global Compact. So that could be seen as a possible area to strengthen that capacity and move forward. I think in the discussion we had yesterday, the same aspect came up in relation to disaggregation, which is critical. and which is an area where many of the SDG indicators very relevant. However, if they're missing the disaggregation aspect in terms of migratory status, they are less so in the context of the GCM. And so thinking about next year's work program for the work stream and how we move forward, but also building that capacity and reflecting the needs of governments and NSOs, national statistical offices, to ensure that they have the capacity to provide information for the SDGs, also disaggregated by the most vulnerable categories, and that includes in many contexts migrants. I wanted to touch upon the question about qualitative indicators, these dichotomous yes, no. In some contexts, they're also a scalar. Uh, there are pros and cons of using these types of measures. As you can see, we've tried to balance qualitative measures and quantitative measures in the proposal. The additional indicators for some of these objectives contain quite an extensive number of the indicators that were also included in the IDAC and in the UN expert group meeting on migration statistics, in particular on employment, the proportion of youth not in education, training, or employment, and also on workers in informal sector. So there is a kind of a balance. The question is, have we placed them in the correct order? So for example, by placing them in the additional proposed indicators rather than in some of the core, is that the best place? And I think when you're answering the questionnaire next week, these are some of the reflections we'd like you to share with us. If we can improve both the composition of the indicators, but also their order. I also very much recognize the perspective, the importance of reflecting rights, human rights, and labor rights. I think that SDG indicator 8.82 is very important, and it's cross-referenced in a number of objectives. Also as an additional indicator, I think it's a critical one on the level of national compliance with labor rights. And again, our colleague from ILO might want to speak to that. But obviously we can do a better job, and that's why I think interacting with you is so important and critical. As Irene said, we've benefited very much from the participation and very active engagement of one of our workstream members who participates from the ITCU, and she has really given us also very strong feedback on making sure that the perspective of labor rights and participation also in trade union activities is well reflected, I think, in a balanced proposal. But again, if you feel that that requires additional support and tweaking in the proposal, we very much welcome that feedback. And lastly, I think there was a comment in the chat regarding to gender. As you could see from our presentation, many of the indicators, I think, do meet the criteria of being gender sensitive. But of course, we don't have many indicators that are focused singularly on gender. So I think that's something also we could think about. And the recruitment and the recognition of skills, which are both critical in the objective 6 and in objective 18, which are on the screen, are indicators that we discussed really at length. And I think we need to hear your voice. Thank you very much, Irene.
Thank you, Claire, for this very valid point. I see a raised hand from Mahmoud. Please, the floor is yours. The hand is not raised anymore, so maybe it was somebody who is.
Yes, I'm still here. Would you allow me to take the floor?
Of course, please go ahead.
I would like to thank you all for inviting me to participate in this meeting. I think that such meetings are excellent and very important. We need to debate in general the role of migrants, especially that we in Jordan, we face a big burden when it comes to migrants. We are very happy at the same time that the migrants who came to our country because they found safety and security security on our land. And this is something that we discuss, particularly in labor unions. I represent the construction trade union in Jordan, and we would like to say that we always raise the voice when it comes to the rights of migrants. Their rights are of our rights. And the system in Jordan always facilitates the conditions because migrant laborers enjoy the same rights as Jordanian workers before the judicial system or any other entity. They enjoy the same rights. And the trade unions in Jordan have allowed many of the migrants, whether they're from Syria or Jordan or other countries, to be members. So we found that it is our right to defend their rights. It is our obligation to defend their rights. And when I notice or I hear or I know of what's happening worldwide, with the way migrant laborers are, labor migrants, sorry, are being treated and how their rights are being violated and they're mistreated. I am really impacted, especially when I see that when developed countries treat migrants as prisoners, as criminals. And I have noticed a while ago in the UK that there were some male migrants at sea or that were being kept on a ship at sea. And there are many similar examples. I don't want to mention all of those, but what I meant to say is that we need all of us to work together in order to service the migrants, to provide them with opportunities, labor opportunities. When we provide those with labor opportunities, especially those who are accompanied by their family members, when we provide them with a job opportunity, we thus would have protected the society where they live. We would have provided them with a decent living condition that will allow them to provide for their families and their children. In our union, we have a special office for migrants. They can submit requests for any services needed. And any migrant can even join the trade unions in Jordan. However, within specific conditions and terms, of course, they have to be members of the union, however, under specific conditions. I would like to stress again through this platform that in the construction sector in Jordan, anyone who would like to join us, we are ready to provide them with the necessary services. And I thank the colleague Muhammad Al Muaita for the comments that they have made. And I was going to mention some of the comments that he had made. But given that this is the first time that I participate, I wanted to introduce myself and to raise the voice of the Jordanian trade unions. And I am a member of several trade unions, including the International Trade Union, and I have the honor to represent the workers of Jordan. And thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much. We had many participants today highlighting the importance of labor migration related aspects. And I think it is indeed a very important aspect. We also have, we also need to focus on the other panels going forward. But before we do so, I would like to take one last intervention by Anis Sour, and then I would like to invite you all then to intervene with regard to the next panels. And if we have some space in the end, we can then, of course, come back to this. Anis Sour, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you all the presenters for their nice presentation. I am Anis Rahman Khan, a Bangladeshi returning migrant. I work in Saudi Arabia 5 years. And since 2000, I am working for the migrant workers community. Being a returning migrant, I am not a academician or like a elite class like you. I am a returning migrant. Maybe my expression, there should be some, please consider my things. Finally, I appreciate Mr. Mahmoud Al-Hayari. Yeah, in Jordan, there is very strong trade union. Migrant workers, foreign workers can join there, but they don't have competed for any post of the official. They only can vote. They have the rights to vote for elected some national trade union leaders, but they cannot be a office bearer. There is some, yeah, and most of our Bangladeshi migrant workers, especially the women, are going to the Middle East country. It is really appreciable because they are allow our workers, but most of their sufferings, not all, those are sufferings. Their maximum sufferings are happening in the country of destination, but there is not, they are not easily access to the justice there. And in other, yes, Southeast Asia or other region, there is some civil society who can support the returning migrant workers, but in Middle East country they have some limitation. So I highly honored the Middle East countries government. They have a lot of good welfare rules for the migrant workers, but at the same time, please think about these workers access to justice and access to association. Please, thank you.
Thank you very much, Anisor, for these points also. We could now move to the next slide and discuss indicators for the second panel. This panel includes the following objectives: Objective 4 on legal identity and documentation, Objective 8 on saving lives, Objective 9 on counter-smuggling, 10 on eradicating trafficking, and 11 on managing borders. Next slide, please. Here we can see the core indicators that are proposed for these objectives. We have one indicator for each, with the exception of Objective 8, for which we have 2 indicators proposed. You will find also more information, particularly with regard to the additional indicators in the discussion note that you should have received. As for the first panel, we look forward to your comments and suggestions, and please feel free to raise your hands and share your thoughts with us. Maybe while you think about it, I can just comment on the fact that of these indicators, we are SDG indicators, that we have one from the MGI and one that is included both in the IDAC and the EGNIS indicators. So these are in line with the frameworks that we selected for mapping tools. I don't know if there is any comments, suggestions that you would like to raise at this point also. I think we still do not have any reflections, but maybe since I know that sometimes we need some time to reflect, let us perhaps take some more time to think about this. Maybe meanwhile I could read them so that we could reflect on this together. So for Objective 4, we are proposing a core indicator on the proportion of children under the age of 5 whose birth have been registered with the civil authority. Then for Objective 8, we are proposing 2 indicators, one on the number of people who died or disappeared during migration towards an international destination. And then we have an indicator on whether or not the country has systems in place to trace and identify missing migrants within the national territory, including formal cooperation agreements with other countries. For Objective 9, we have an indicator on whether or not the government has formed a strategy to address trafficking in persons and migrant smuggling. Then we have an indicator for Objective 10 on the number of victims of human trafficking, and for Objective 11 on the estimated number of persons in detention due to entering the country irregularly. And I see we have our hand that is raised from Mohammed. Mohammed, please, the floor is yours.
شكرا.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but there's interference from another speaker. When it comes to the first indicator related to children, in the objective 4, the problem is in the registration of these children officially in the countries of destination, specifically in the 11 countries. First of all, children cannot be registered. Children who are born out of wedlock, these cannot be registered. And this leads to additional violations of children's rights who are being pushed to work at a very young age because they are not accepted in children. Even when they are sick, they cannot be treated in public hospitals because they have no identification paper that prove their identity. These children, or specifically also the other case of children who are born out of marriage, but they have lost the legal residency status, and as such, they cannot, the parents cannot resort to the public authorities to re-register these children, and so those would suffer similarly to those who are born out of wedlock. We have many similar cases. Many cases of children whose parents traveled abroad and couldn't take them with them. Can you imagine the situation of such children? Also, when it comes to the registration of migrant workers, the COVID pandemic really brought forward a lot of very precious lessons. Many of the migrant workers in the Arab region, 54% of those work in irregular sectors, and these sectors are far away from any oversight by any authority, and there is no data collection or statistics available as to those. And this creates such a huge gap when it comes to the registration of these workers and to specify their status. Those are treated, and I apologize for using these terms, they are treated as illegal. I'm sorry to use this term. And this is what Sarah also mentioned when it comes to the security approach when dealing with irregular migrants. Usually, irregular migrants don't renew their permits because this process is very costly, and as such they are pursued by the legal authorities, and in many instances they are imprisoned. And on the chat, there is a question about clarifying the irregular migrants. What do we mean? Irregular sector, sorry, what we mean by that? Those who work in construction, those who work in agricultural sector, those who work in as domestic workers, those who work in the restaurants, etc. All of those are irregular sectors, in addition to those who came to the Arab countries based on contracts, but then found themselves facing illegal contracts and such, they face the obligation to work in irregular sectors. But I don't want to focus a lot on those and to mainly focus on the agreements that are in place between the countries of destination and countries of origin. And also here there is a role and responsibility that falls upon the trade unions to have an oversight on such contracts and agreements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed, for these points and also for reflecting with us on the consequences of lacks of registration with civil authorities, and also on different challenges that may be related to this, and also with situations of irregularity or not being registered more broadly. Are there perhaps other comments or suggestions with regard to these indicators? Sarah, please, the floor is yours.
يعني بالنسبة
When
للهوية
it comes to
القانونية وتوثيق
legal identity and the documentation of or registration of migrants in our Arab region, especially in the Middle East, the countries that have the kafala system, they withhold the workers' passports. This is the most common violation, holding a person's passport from. So this is the first step leading to all the problems. Just like the colleague Muhammad said, they face difficulty to register their children or to work in another sector or have another job, difficulty accessing services and benefits. All the problems that migrant workers face start with withholding the passport. In most countries, withholding a person's passport is a punishable offense. However, unfortunately, we have a problem implementing these laws, and there are a lot of citizens are immune to these laws. I am talking here mostly about migrant workers. A lot of workers are no longer able to take their passports back. So they stay in the country in an illegitimate way. Some of them manage to take their passports back, of course, without holding the person accountable, the person who took their passports in the first place. So no sanctions are being implemented in these countries. Therefore, withholding passports has become common practice. It's very easy for any employer to withhold migrant workers' passports. So it is important to implement the laws in this regard. It's very important for these laws to be implemented, and immunity must be lifted. These employers have to be held accountable. There's another point or other issues related to securing borders, saving the lives of migrants, combating trafficking and smuggling. All of these are important for Arab countries, but currently in Northern African countries, a lot of migrant workers either drown in the sea or are subject to trafficking. People put them in what are called the death boats or vessels, promising them that they will go to Europe. So when it comes to this problem, states exchange blame. of course, without providing any protection to these people. So people drown, migrants drown, while countries are exchanging blame. It is very important to have secure locations in order to receive these migrants, to help them, and to look into their situation instead of leaving them. Some of them are stuck in forests. Not all of them drown at sea. So some of them are stuck in forests in very difficult climate conditions. All these issues require more cooperation, more international cooperation. It is important to have more cooperation agreements, but most importantly, these agreements should be implemented and should turn into tangible initiatives and programs in order to help these people and save their lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Sarah as well for raising these important points. We heard many comments that were really highlighting the need of approaches that really reflect on migrant workers' rights. And we were very lucky to have in the workstream also a representative of trade unions in different countries, the International Trade Union Confederations, and I think that the colleague may be in the virtual room. So in case she would like to intervene, we could give her the floor.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Irene. This is Iramar from International Trade Union Confederation. It's a confederation of union organizations from over 160 countries, and with affiliates in those countries, we represent almost 200 million workers. It was a pleasure to be part of this work stream, working on this very difficult, complex issue of developing indicators to look at and see the progress towards the objectives of the Global Compact on Migration. And it's really, I'm really pleased to see also amongst the audience here today reflections on workers' rights. Maybe one thing, I mean, this has been a very open and consultative process. And I thank also particularly Irene and Claire, who have been chairing this difficult process with transparency and accommodating a big variety of priorities amongst the work stream members. Maybe in relation to this panel, but also reflecting from the previous panel's objectives, what we see amongst the core indicators also is more broadly trying to touch upon the kind of the soul of the specific objective, but underneath that, as Irene and Claire have already mentioned in their presentations, there are additional objectives we are proposing, some of which provide more concrete kind of measures to see progress in kind of subcategories under each objective. When I look at, for example, objective 10, here you see as the core indicator proposed the SDG 1622. So looking at the number of human trafficking victims, so hopefully a decreased number would indicate progress. But as trade unions, as we see child labor, recruitment costs, creating debt bondage, and similar aspects, these are also reflected in the additional indicators in this preliminary proposal we are relaying for you. But we really look forward to also receiving more inputs through the survey. The co-chairs will share with member states and other stakeholders to receive more input. If I may also, Sarah's reflection on the need kind of to look into the situation in individual countries, individual regions, and the potential to have specific indicators that are related to those countries. I think that's also very valid. One thing, of course, we wanted to do was to see indicators, the proposed indicators, which could be valid in all countries, in all regions. But underneath those, of course, there could be certain specific issues in countries that may need to look into, and individual indicators could be considered for those countries later on for them to see the progress. But for the GCM, we would also want to see indicators across the board, looking at the progress in all the member states. Thank you very much for giving me the floor, Irene, and thanks for chairing this. Over.
Thank you very much, Irem, for these reflections today, and also for all the reflections and insights you brought into the process and the discussions in the past month. And in the interest of time, since we are running a bit late, we could perhaps move forward to the next panel. I know there is a hand raised and there are some comments in the chat, which we are also kindly asking translators if they could help us maybe translate them. And I would invite then Mahmoud, who has his hand raised, to perhaps participate and intervene in the next panel, if that's okay for you. Then, so for the third panel, we have 5 objectives. The first one being on data. The second one, it's objective number 2 or 3 on information provision. Then objective 7 on reducing vulnerabilities, objective 17 on eliminating discrimination, and objective 23 on international cooperation. And in the next slide, we can see the core indicators that we are proposing for this. For objective 1, we are proposing 2 core indicators. For objectives 3 and 7 and 23, only 1. And for objective 17, we are proposing 2 core indicators. And we also look forward to hearing your thoughts, maybe starting from Mahmoud, in case you would also like to intervene for this panel. The floor is yours.
أنا بس حبيت أتحدث عن مؤشر واحد.
I wanted to talk about one indicator in particular, and I wanted to say that the rate of migrants in Jordan reached 30% of the population. These migrant workers don't have a lot of educational benefits or features that allow them to enter the market, the labor market. When it comes to this issue, we had to find a way in order to involve the migrant workers in the labor force, labor market. We have high rates of unemployment in Jordan, but we look at it from a humanitarian point of view. There are a lot of regular and irregular workers. In a lot of sectors, the skills of migrant workers are not recognized in Jordan if they had their education or they learned their skills in another country. I would like to thank the ILO, which launched the RBL project. Through this project, we managed to help the migrants and recognize their skills and expertise based on the systems and in line with the standards that we use in Jordan. I just wanted to talk about this indicator in particular. In order to achieve sustainable development, we should make sure that this indicator. The construction syndicate in Jordan took upon itself to implement the RBL project. And I am one of the members of the construction council, and I would like to say that we now recognize a lot of these skills. Of course, we cannot recognize child labor. There are some systems that would allow children to attend trainings or to be in centers that are specific to children. They are maybe called associations, in order to help them and help them acquire specific skills. Syrian workers have the right to participate in our syndicate, but our system does not give them the right to vote, to apply for candidacy. This is the reality. But there is no other discrimination between Jordanian workers and Syrian workers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mahmoud, for these important reflections also. And are there any other reflections or comments, perhaps by participants, member states, or stakeholders? Sarah, please go ahead.
شكرا. وعلى موضوع
Thank you.
المهارات
When it comes to skills, the skills of migrant workers, we have classifications. So they are divided between skilled workers and unskilled workers. These categories themselves lead to abuse sometimes. When you say, for example, when you say, for example, that a domestic worker is unskilled and has a low income, this would deprive them of some rights, and this would facilitate their exploitation. There are no unskilled workers. We consider that each worker has skills in the field that he is working in. It is important not to link skills with income. However, this is what's happening in reality. Most of low-income workers are classified as unskilled workers in order to keep paying low wages, basically, to keep paying low incomes. This is included in labor policies and migration strategies. We should steer clear from these terms and these concepts.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for this reflection on skilled and unskilled, the migration definitions. Ogira, please, the floor is yours. We have a hand raised by Hogir Pao from Iraq. If you would like to intervene, please go ahead.
شكرا جزيلا لكم على
Thank
إتاحة
you very much for giving me the opportunity to participate, and thank you for the valuable information that you provided. I would like to add to the issue of terminology in Iraq. As a civil society organization, we cooperate with the Labor Ministry and the Ministry of Social Affairs to deal with foreign labor and migrant workers, skilled or unskilled. Now we have in other two categories in Iraq, those who are registered and those who are non-registered. those who are non-registered are now considered legitimate. So foreign workers are allowed to enter without being registered or without getting the appropriate protection. However, they deal with a lot of problems when it comes to income and basic human rights. We have another type. I only wanted to add the other type, which is registered and unregistered. There are hundreds of thousands of workers that are not registered in Iraq, and we should mention them in the definitions and in the indicators. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hogir, who represents the public aid organization. Is there perhaps any other reflections or comments? I see a reflection in the chat about challenges regarding terms that are referring to skilled or unskilled migration. Would there be any other comments or reflections, perhaps, or even question at this stage? And as a reminder, we are discussing the core indicators for objectives, but also the additional indicators that are included in the discussion note. So in case you would like to reflect on some of the additional indicators or even pose a questions on one of those, you are also very much welcome to do so. Otherwise, if there are no comments, we could perhaps move to the next panel, unless Claire, you would like to share any reflections here.
Thank you, Irene. I just wanted to recognize the comment made from our colleague from Jordan about the importance of reflecting, apologies, the high share of migrants living in some of these countries and the important challenges and in some contexts, opportunities this creates. And I think for this region in particular, which has some of the largest shares of migrants in total population, this is a critical aspect. Many of the countries, for different reasons, have extremely high proportions of migrants among the total population, and also for the working age category in particular. So thank you for that, for raising that point, and it's very important. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Claire, and also I would like to echo Claire on this. Thank you very much to all of you for these points. You are really enriching discussions, bringing in your thematic expertise, and this is very valuable and also very useful for us. If there are no further comments, maybe let's move to the next panel and in particular to the next slide. Yes, so panel 4 is about 5 objectives. We have objective 14 on consular protection. We have objective 15 on access to basic services. Objective 16, which is focusing on inclusion and social cohesion. Then we have objective 19 on migrant and diaspora contributions, and objective 20, which is focusing on remittances. And in the next slide, we can see the core indicators that we are proposing. We are proposing 1 core indicator for objective 14, 1 for objective 15 and 16, and 2 for objectives 19 and 20. And these are also all of indicators from the MGI and the SDG indicator frameworks. I see that we have a comment in the chat. A participant is asking if you could have the PowerPoint presentation, and I think that the Secretariat is going to upload the presentation, the slides, to the WorldStream webpage after this consultation. You may have seen that the workstream web page. Maybe we can also post it in the chat. It's hosted on the UN Migration Network Secretariat under the workstreams, and there you can also find additional information such as report on the survey responses on mapping 1 and mapping 2 when we will finalize mapping 2, and of course the discussion note in its current version and the revised drafts. Would there be any comments and reflections on these core indicators?
Excuse me, this is Anisur again.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you all. With the respect to all presenters and participants, no human is unskilled. Maybe they are less skilled. Who can take food from the table, from his plate to his mouth, he or she is skilled. So if we say unskilled, I think this is discrimination to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anisur, for this important point. Are there any other comments or suggestions? Mohammed from Atuk, please go ahead.
نعم تعقيبا على النقطة التي أثيرت
Yes, to add to what has been said about skills, I won't go into details, but it's not about high skills and low skills. The issue is mainly related to the recognition of skills. Recently, a recognition program has been launched to recognize these skills, just like my colleague Mahmoud said. Otherwise, workers will be dealt with as unskilled workers. I would like to talk about remittances. Remittances play a vital role in the Arab region. For example, we have to say that half of the senders, of remittances senders, are women, if not more. After these remittances contribute in the economic development of the countries of origin. $57 billion have been sent from countries of destination to countries of origin. These $25 billion have been sent by women. 25 out of these 57. Migrant workers in the Arab region are very high. In practice, women are considered less than men, even though their contributions when it comes to remittances sent to countries of origin account to more than half of the registered amounts. However, they face double the violations that male migrant workers face. I wanted to highlight this important point. If the indicators are not gender sensitive, I think that a big portion of migrant workers will not enjoy their basic rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for for this very important point and also for highlighting the importance of remittances for the Arab region. Also, Karima, in her keynote speak earlier in this call, highlighted the importance of remittances. Many thanks also for highlighting the importance of looking at gender aspects. As I think Claire already mentioned in the meeting earlier today, the discussion note also includes an annex on disaggregation for indicators, but then next year the work stream will also focus specifically on developing a migration data disaggregation strategy. And this will allow us to look more at gender issues, but we do agree that this is a very relevant point. Sarah, I see you have your hand raised. Please go ahead.
بس كنت بدي أعلق على الهدف.
I just wanted to make a comment on objective 14 when it comes to the indicator. The protection from consuls, from embassies for their own expats should always be provided, not only in times of crisis or in countries that are facing conflicts. And we notice that many of the migrant workers who are not registered do not enjoy any protection from their embassies or consulates. They cannot even contact these embassies because they are in irregular status. Because usually in the Arab countries, the embassies only recognize the registered expats. Even sometimes the repatriation of bodies or dead workers would be almost impossible if the worker has not been registered. And here I would like to note the agreements between the countries of origin and countries of destination and bilateral agreements. Sometimes there would be some items or clauses that strengthen such actions or lack of protection to be provided for those who are in irregular status or those who are in an illegal status. And if the embassy knows of any unregistered or irregular worker, they have to inform the Ministry of Labor, for example, of that. And this creates more obstacles and causes additional impediments before migrants, and they cannot access embassy services. So it's not only in times of crisis or in countries that are facing conflicts or crises or difficulties that such protection should be provided, but at all times.
Many thanks, Sarah, for making these important points. Mahmoud, please, the floor is yours.
I would like to thank you again. I would like to give you some examples and stories. Many of the migrant workers who arrived to Jordan and didn't have any travel documents with them. And so they contacted their embassies and they didn't receive any kind of assistance from their embassies. So they didn't get any compensation. They didn't get any new documents or new passports or any information that could assist them. So in truth, there are embassies that do not cooperate or collaborate with the workers or migrant workers. And in some instances, we see that the embassies do not assist their expats. They tell them, you have traveled, you should have a passport or travel document. If you've lost your travel document, then this would require them to provide a lot of information in return. And so the migrant would find themselves in a situation that is even more difficult. But we in Jordan, we were able to provide some solution. We gave work permits to migrant workers who did not hold any travel documents. So we assisted them and we gave them the work permit that allowed them to have a source of income. However, I also wanted to mention a very important issue. What was the reason behind the RBL and to strengthen social inclusion and to provide the equal rights to migrant workers. We don't talk about the first class or second class of migrant workers, skilled or unskilled. This is not what we talk about. When we work or we focus on migrants, and when we talk about skilled or unskilled, this is something related uh, to the business owner, to the employer. For example, just like when you want to buy a car, if let's say you want to hire a driver, there would be no discrimination when it comes to any worker that is being employed other than whether this worker knows how to drive or doesn't know how to drive. So we have a very important percentage of migrant workers. We have more than 30% of the labor force from Syrian migrants in Jordan. So we found that it was necessary to coordinate with the IOM, and I thank them for all their efforts to put in place the RBL system in Jordan to assist migrant workers and not to create any kind of discrimination of any form. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mahmoud. Before giving the floor to Ayman, I would like to mention that that our technical support has kindly shared the link to the UN Network on Migration website, and particularly to the World Stream page, where you can also find the discussion note, and you will also see the slides after the conclusion of the meeting. And Ayman, the floor is yours now.
Thank you. Well, actually, let me speak in Arabic. يعني في البداية كنت أتمنى أن
In
تكون
the outset, I would have loved for the indicators and the presentations to have all been in Arabic, because this is a very important session and this is dedicated for the Arab region. So again, I would have hoped to have them in Arabic. Second, when it comes to the skilled and semi-skilled workers, in truth, the ILO does not consider that there are persons who are unskilled. This is why we use skilled and semi-skilled. And we never use unskilled at all. Third, and the most important part, and the comment that I would like to share with you, is that the indicators in general detect the presence of documents. So there's a monitoring of whether there is integration or no integration. Is there a policy paper or no? Are there specific programs or not? So I believe that this kind of measurement is theoretical. So we would have hoped for the indicators to be different. Is there, for example, an applied policy related to integration? Is there, for example, in Objective 20, and on the slide in front of me?
inclusion. ماذا لو كان لدى
Whether or not the country has programs to promote financial inclusions. What if the country has programs for financial inclusion on paper, but it's not applied? So I would have wanted for the indicators to be related to measuring the enactment, the implementation, and not the readiness to implement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ayman, for these points. Are there perhaps any other comments, suggestions, or insights from the room? So since we are reaching the end of this discussion on the panels, and this is the last panel, in case you would like to share any thoughts or reflections on previous panels or on the general proposal, please feel free to go ahead with it now. I think we have a comment in the chat, and it is referring to the global nature of migration and also to its being a cross-cutting issue, and I think also to the need to consider pull and push factors and also the whole complexity of migration matters. If there are comments or reflections you would like to share, please feel free to go ahead with this now. Otherwise, I would perhaps give the floor to Claire in case she has any reflections or any comments to the previous reflections shared by participants.
Thank you so much, Irene, and thank you again to all the participants for their very useful, insightful comments. So first on the issue of the skills, we completely agree. It's not a question of labeling human beings as having skills or not, but as you know, the objective 18 really focuses on the recognition of skills and making sure that the human capital of the person, whatever level that might be, is not wasted in the country of destination, so that they can benefit the most from the training and skills that they have, be they academic or vocational and so forth. So I think the indicator there is really engaged at measuring the recognition of skills. I think one of the participants also mentioned that, so I think that's critical. We had a very useful comment, I think, also on remittances. Remittances are critical. We benefited very much from the active engagement in our work stream of colleagues who are experts on remittances, and also are co-chairing another work stream in the context of the GCM migration network work that is focused on remittances, and another one that is focused on diasporas, so objective 19. And both of these colleagues provided excellent feedback, I think, trying to make us balance the scope of the indicators with regard to these core objectives. With regard to objective 20, I think it's important to also look at the fact that it looks at financial inclusion. And I think that is critical, because ultimately leveraging the remittance is also about having access to those sources, so that that workers and their families can benefit the most. I also had a comment in relation to objective 14. One of the colleagues mentioned that, and indeed we agree that it shouldn't be the issue of enhancing consular protection should not be limited to crisis situations alone. We have an additional indicator, which I think might meet those concerns of yours, that's broader, about the existence of institutions to assist nationals residing abroad, embassies, consulates, etc., labor attaches. And this is taken from the MGI indicator framework. But again, when you answer the questionnaire, if you find that the balance for objective 14 could be improved, please feel free to articulate that. I also had a comment about the implementation aspect, which I think has been raised also by Iram and was raised yesterday as well. One of the big challenges we have in preparing this proposal is that we are mandated to put forward a limited set, and that means the type of indicators that might be required really to assess implementation in some contexts might be more numerous, articulated, and granular. And so, for example, the MGI exercise, which many governments have conducted together with IOM's assistance and support, that actually is nearly 100 indicators that goes into great detail, not into just the policies, but how they're enacted at the country level and some of the limitations. And I think that type of more granular exercise is indeed provides the type of more detailed information that you're seeking in terms of implementation. And I think it's important to recognize that this limited set that will ultimately be proposed is intended to be one of the main tools for monitoring the implementation, but not the only one. And so we know that for going into more details and also in thematic areas that might be of particular interest to a country, other indicator frameworks might be suitable to complement this and provide that additional detail. So I hope that provides some insight into that choice. And thank you for the floor.
Thank you very much, Claire, for this reflection. I think we have one participant who has the microphone open, and this creates some interferences. And other than that, please let us know if you would have any comments or suggestions. Meanwhile, I would also like to thank you all for reflecting with us today on how we could improve the discussion note and better integrate the points that you that were raised. And as Claire also mentioned, these regional consultations are a very important moment to collect feedback from member states and stakeholders from the regions. We will also have another channel that we have foreseen for this. Next week, you will receive, the Secretariat will share a questionnaire through which we would like to collect further feedback, meaning that you will have some time to think about the discussions today, to perhaps have another look at the discussion note in general, but also at specific indicators proposed for objectives that you find interesting. And then based on this, we would really welcome your responses to the survey. In case there are no further reflections, I would then perhaps give the floor to the Secretariat and to Amy, who will introduce the speaker who will provide concluding remarks on behalf of the colleagues. Thank you very much. Maybe in this case, I could perhaps have the pleasure to introduce the next speaker myself. So let us welcome Mrs. Marina Manke, who is the Chief of the Global Migration Data Analysis Center, GMDAC at IOM. Marina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Irena. Thank you, colleagues. Claire, it's a pleasure to be able to say a few remarks. I promise I'm not going to talk a lot, but I was listening very carefully to today's discussions. And of course, first and foremost, I would like to thank everybody who has contributed to really ensuring that the approach of us jointly delivering on paragraph 70 and formulating this limited set of indicators is indeed comprehensive, all-inclusive. I was amazed today to hear the voices of actually people, migrants, who were referring about their own situations. I think this focus on making sure that whatever we're coming up is really for governments and member states, but we really want to also hear, truly want to hear from everybody, all the partners from the private sector, from the different parts of the government. I heard about statistical officers talking, some sort of migration authorities talking today. So I do hope that all the very valuable insights which you shared with us today are going to really help us formulate that set of indicators in a way so that it's relevant. It is limited, as Claire spoke about it, but at the same time, it really points to opportunities for collecting information or defining submission for voluntary reporting in line with complementary additional indicators. So I don't know if you're aware, but in my previous post, I worked on the area of labor mobility and human development. And for me, the focus of today's consultations on the issue of the situation of migrant workers, on the topic of really human capital of migrants, of families, of skills retention, of really empowerment of migrants, of issues related to their undocumented status, challenges of how we promote human mobility and labor mobility in the context where the whole notion of skill is evolving. The digital transformations which are affecting our societies, where people start delivering their services, sometimes even not crossing borders. So what do we do with measuring this type of labor mobility? I saw a number of colleagues from ILO attending and listening to this, and I would like to thank also members and partners from the working group, our UN colleagues, but everybody, all the other entities who have been with us on that journey until today's point. Today is the second level, regional consultations after yesterday. I know that our colleague Belahovi yesterday concluded from the UNDESA the consultations, and we are looking forward to really putting all the rich feedback together and take additional review of everything what you are sharing with us today, so that we can do another stress testing of the list of indicators that we have formulated so far. So continue staying in touch, engage with us in a true coordinated, comprehensive engagement process. The team Irena, Claire mentioned at which point, through which link you can share your feedback. So do stay in touch, because indeed together we can make sure that whatever comes out of this very important process, political process, is really yielding its results. So I think let me maybe not take more time of everybody's attention. So I would like again to thank everybody, and also a lot of colleagues from the Secretariat who has been behind, the interpreters who are doing a great work. I did pay attention that the slides should have been translated in Arabic, fully agree, but just really believe me that the team has been working day and night and the weekends. Do believe me that that's what they are doing to ensure that the content, the consultation are really reaching the impact and inclusiveness that we have today. So wishing everybody nice summer. Stay in touch. Don't forget about that process, even though we finish it maybe for today for the Arabic and the Middle East and Northern Africa country and the Arabic focus region. So I saw a lot of colleagues from IAM missions, from regional office also were with us. So we hope to stay in touch and receive feedback, and then reconvene at global consultations or other surveys that we are having in mind in the next months. So unless I'm missing anything, Irene and Claire, I am happy to then thank you for nodding and confirming, to again thank everybody who was with us today, and wishing everybody a nice rest of the day. Yeah, stay in touch, and we're happy to hear from you moving forward. All the best. Bye-bye. Hi, I recognize some faces. We should have brought the faces onto the thing. You see? Okay. Ciao, colleagues. Bye-bye. Thank you for being with us.
Bye.
Bye.